Welcome back. We made it through the regular season, but there is still DFS to be had. I know, Brady, you were talking about before the show that both sites, I believe, FanDuel and DraftKings, chopped the weekend into two main slates, both filled with half the games. I think most people don't like that. I kind of actually like it. Maybe it's just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. But I do think the idea that in a regular NFL season of our main slates, like you can play turbo slates, you can play the Thursday to Monday slates or whatever, but of the main slates, you get 17 chances to realize your edge. That's nothing. If you know anything about variance, about range of outcomes, about how random the NFL is, it is so hard, especially for me when I'm playing. Most of my role is in large field tournaments. The odds of me ever realizing my edge playing the play action are minimal. It's a tournament that if you're 100 times better than the average player, you need 15 years to ever realize your edge, which is insane. It's kind of dumb that I play it, but I do think if I have an edge, I'm going to play it. So if I get two slates, two more chances to realize my edge in a weekend, I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad idea there. I'm more of I would like it to be like a one slate, but yeah, I think two is fine. You get two different chances. I definitely agree with that. And it should be a pretty fun slate, especially I like Saturday the most. Sunday's not bad as well. It should be fun.
Yeah, I think if it were a one-day slate, they'd have to let me enter the play action 40 times. That would have to be the rule we would agree on because I only get 20 entries in it. So
Exactly.
let's hop into it. The first game, I'll just go in chronological order here. The first game we have is the Buffalo Bills versus the Indianapolis Colts, a 6.5-point spread, a 51-point total. I will mostly be talking about these games as it pertains to their main slate. So these first three games, I'll talk about them relative to each other, mostly in terms of ownership, but also in terms of like who you're picking at each position, because they do have the Saturday to Sunday slate. There's not a ton of money in it. That's not where you're going to get your big prize pools. I think most people are going to be playing both slates, and they literally just do that so they can get rake out of you twice in 1 week. But I also do that because I hope that if I'm a winning player, I can take money from my opponents twice in 1 week. So that's why I'm playing both of them and the Saturday to Sunday. But I'll talk about them as they pertain to their individual main slate. So in this one, because we have Buffalo with a 28.75 implied team total, the Bucks are the closest at 26.5. They're over 2 points, 2.5 or 2.25 points behind Buffalo. It's going to be massive Buffalo chalk if you're playing the 3-gamer on Saturday. I think that's warranted in general. I do think, and this has buried me, there have been like 3 or 4 of these 2/3 game slates throughout the year, and 3 of them have been my 3 worst slates of the season. So maybe I'm not the guy you should be talking to about it, but I will always say that anytime we get the chance to have a quarterback who could be 35 to 40% owned, and there are 6 games. Is it really one quarterback? Given that pricing is typically in the ballpark of efficient, like Taysom Hill week, Jalen Hurts first and second starts, like Kyler Murray earlier in the year, there are situations where pricing is bad, where pricing is just downright, you gain so much by playing this player that it's difficult to move off of them. Running back, that kind of happens every now and then too. That's not the case for me. I think maybe there's a small points per dollar edge in playing Josh Allen, but I'm always going to be moving to different places. And honestly, in this game is actually my favorite place to move to. It's not that I think this is a bad game to target. I think that you gain an edge, at least in my opinion, by targeting dusty old Phil Rivers in the same game with just as much scoring. Just some of it's going to be distributed more favorably to Buffalo, but their prices on DraftKings specifically, but on both sites, account for that. So I do think if you're targeting this game, my preferred way is to go with the Phillip Rivers, and then I'm fine eating the Stephon Diggs chalk. I'm not crossing Buffalo off the radar. I'm just saying that I think in this game, my favorite quarterback based on their price and ownership is going to be a Phillip Rivers trailing, having to throw the ball a lot. We have it in our minds that this is a Jonathan Taylor-led team, and if they're winning by 10 points against Jacksonville, they probably are a Jonathan Taylor-led team. This ain't Jacksonville. They're not projected to win. Not even close. They're almost a touchdown underdog. I think Phillip Rivers throwing to where I think we can have a little bit more predictability around his receivers now. He basically has 2 to 3 receivers worth note, which is not great, but it's better than, early in the season where it was like between 3 and 4 plus the tight ends. I think of Phillip Rivers, T.Y. Hilton, and then run it back with the chalky Stephon Diggs is going to be my preferred way to target it. Is that viable, or am I getting really galaxy brain on these plays?
No, it's definitely viable, and I was going to mention a lot of your points too. And if I'm doing like 1 to 3 lineups, I'm definitely getting Josh Allen there. It's hard to ignore how good he is, the upside of Josh Allen, the upside of his stacking options as well, Diggs, John Brown. So if I'm doing like 1 to 3 lineups, I'll make sure to have those in there. But if like you and me, we do like a lot of lineups, 150. I'm going to be doing that this week as well. I'm going to be having lineups where I'm getting different, where I'm getting off that Josh Allen chalk, where I'm getting off of even that Diggs chalk in some lineups as well. And one way to do that, as you mentioned him, Phillip Rivers. I just like the game script. They're decent-sized dogs and a 51-point game total, which is the highest total on the 3-game slate. And like you mentioned, he's going to be passing the ball a ton, coming from behind. And another way to get off of that chalk, I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be really, really chalky, especially after the game last week where he had 41.4 DraftKings points. Everybody's going to see that. Everybody's going to hop on. I honestly don't like the game script for him, especially if they fall behind, which I do think they do. I'd rather attack that passing game of the Colts there and actually like Hines a little bit better at a pretty sizable discount, because if they do get behind, they're going to be using Hines a lot in the passing game. So I'm mostly going to be on Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, especially in cash, single entry. But if I am playing 150 lineups, I will be, moving on to some Rivers and all that. But of course, you still got to play Josh Allen and talk about him a little bit, because hard to ignore the upside. Not the best match in the world, but I don't really think the matchup matters. As for stacking options for Josh Allen, Cole Beasley is questionable. I really don't think he plays. If he does play, Cole Beasley at 5,300 is a really good play. But if he does not play, I really like John Brown at 4,700. Gabriel Davis is somebody else. On the Colts side, stacking with Rivers, I'd probably go to T.Y. Hilton being my favorite. I think you could even stack him with Hines. That's going to get a lot of receptions with them coming from behind. And then Pittman's really cheap as well. So this is a game you definitely want to target, especially on a 3-game slate with the 51-point game total, the next best being like a 45-point game total. But lots of ways to get different for sure.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think on the Saturday slate, I would rather play Josh Allen than I would play Lamar Jackson on the Sunday slate. I think if there is a chalk quarterback on either slate, I actually prefer Allen because his price premium over the other quarterbacks on this slate, it's like you don't have to pay that much more to get up to Josh Allen, and he's burying the other quarterbacks. It's like 27 DraftKings points per game to like 23 for, I think, Tom Brady is the next closest quarterback. And like 1,000, I think, separates them, maybe even less. Whereas Lamar Jackson is like easily more expensive relative to the other options, and also does not give you, at least on this season, has not given you the actual just fantasy points per game advantage over the next closest quarterback. He just is not getting the bang for your buck that Josh Allen is relative to the rest of the quarterbacks. So I'm not sure where I end up falling relative to the field on Josh Allen, but I do think as far as chalk goes, he makes sense. I'm fine with it. And I love the Hines call. I think Hines is the perfect leverage off of Jonathan Taylor, because these are two players who are sort of diametrically opposed. One player is primarily a beneficiary of positive game script, weak defenses, overall good environments for our typical running back. And the other one is just a glorified receiver in Nyheim Hines. And I think that makes them, I don't want to say, 1-to-1 negatively correlated. That's obviously not mathematically true, but in terms of the scenarios in which you're playing them, they're very much opposites. So if you're playing your Josh Allen stacks, especially if you're just playing the Allen Diggs like bread and butter stack, you need to get different elsewhere. I think the perfect leverage is going to a Hines. So I think that sums up how I feel about this pretty well. Is there any reason to play any of these Bills running backs?
There is not. I cannot get to Zach Moss or Singletary. I mean, if anything, Singletary, but man, it's hard to get to either there. I think there's better options on the slate.
Yeah, the Bills are one of the 3 or 4 teams that I think are the heaviest pass percentage over expectation, despite the fact that they were the number 2 seed. They still ended up passing at a pretty high clip, and they ended up, I believe, bottom 5 in running back rush attempts. So factoring out the Josh Allen carries, they just don't use their running backs. And when you have Josh Allen, why the hell would you, man? He's sick. So sick cat. I definitely would be doing the same thing the Bills are. I like attacking them. Did Cole Beasley, I'm not sure if you saw this, he tweeted out that he's going to drop a new song, I think tonight. Does that, do you have a model that factors any of that in?
You said he's going to drop a new song? Seriously?
Yeah, dude, he's a rapper. Do you know?
I had no clue. I got to go check it out then. That's awesome.
There's so much about Cole Beasley we must know. Like, have you ever seen him dunk?
No, I haven't.
Dude, he has hops like you wouldn't believe. Like, I saw him in just some off-season stuff, and he's like I think he's 5, like 9 or 10, And like he
Yeah,
dunks like a 6'3" dude. Sick. So
that's awesome.
definitely stuff that I'm not sure if I have. I'll have to check my models and see if I have anything for those in there. But if there are like X factors in my models, I'll be boosting him. I love Cole Beasley, but hope he plays. Hope he plays. If not, like you said, Gabriel Davis and John Brown especially end up being really good price adjusted plays. Next game is my least favorite game to talk about because it's sad. It's Seattle versus Los Angeles. Seattle 3.5 point favorites, but that is maybe a bit deceiving because their 23-point total is, I believe, not even. Oh my god, it's not even close. Like we'll talk about them later. The Titans are underdogs, and the Titans have a 2.5 implied total higher. I mean, the Colts are underdogs to a really good Bills team, and their total is within a point. Even though Vegas expects Seattle to win, they do not expect them to do it through scoring points. They expect it to happen through the offensive incompetence of the Los Angeles Rams. On the 3-game slate, this is a third of the slate's players, and it's not going to draw a third of the slate's ownership. What is the breaking point? How low does, say, a Russell Wilson DK Metcalf stack have to get for you to consider it?
Oh man, that sounds awful. I mean, it's such a tough matchup against the Rams that has like one of the best, if not the best, passing defense in the league. And we've been talking about it like the past 5-6 weeks. Like they're not letting Russ cook, and he's just not been doing great. I mean, Tyler Lockett had a really good game last week, but it's really hard to get onto this Seattle offense in general. I do think they'll gain some ownership, at least Russell Wilson, a little bit because he's Russell Wilson. I think Carlos Hyde will gain some ownership. Carson will gain some ownership as well because I don't know. But man, it's hard to get onto the Seattle side at all. I'm not really interested in anyone on Seattle, as crazy as that sounds. Like if you would have told me that it's a 3-game slate like earlier in the year, I'd probably be on Seattle here, but I just can't. They just don't look that great. As for on the Rams side, so if Jared Goff does not play, kind of interesting play here would be Wolford at 4,900. So last week he did not look all that great. 22 for 38, 231 yards, no touchdowns, but he did have 6 rushing attempts for 56 yards. If you play Wolford in your lineup, I messed around with it. You could play literally any other player that you want there. So I think he's something to look at just because of his rushing yard upside and a pretty good matchup against a Seattle defense that has looked good as of late, but still not all that great. So I think Wolford at 4,100 is something to look at. And other than that, I think Cooper Kupp's coming back, right?
He should be. He was. I checked earlier. He was supposed to have practiced. He was activated off COVID, so I don't think there's any reason for him not to.
Okay, yeah. If Jared Goff plays, I think Cooper Kupp's going to be a good play. If not, probably hard to get on those Rams wide receivers there. I think Cam Akers is really interesting at 5,100. So last week, he was on the verge of not playing, ended up playing, and they gave him 25 touches. If you're going to give me 20-plus touches at 5,100, I don't care who you're playing on a 3-game slate. I like Cam Akers a ton here at that price because of the volume he's going to get. So Cam Akers for me, maybe some Wolford. But other than that, this game is really, really ugly.
Are you saying that if I play Wolford, like you literally can play the highest player at every position?
No, pretty much.
I would like, because I wouldn't be surprised. He's, I think, 4,900, and like, especially if you played Wolford and kind of only went with like the cheapest of the Seattle. I think it's DK Metcalf now, but if you played Wolford and didn't have a ton of interest in Seattle because they're kind of egregiously priced, just we've been playing them at high prices, thinking they would bounce back. So the DK algorithm doesn't price them down to like DK Metcalf should be freaking like 5.2K or whatever right now, the way Seattle is playing, and he's not. So I actually think that if you didn't play like Seattle guys and you played Wolford with a Robert Woods, it'd be not too far off from literally not having a salary cap. And to add on to a little bit of interest in Wolford, he averaged over 20 rushing yards per game when he was in the AAF. I believe he played for the Arizona Hotshots, if I'm not mistaken. And then at Wake Forest, in his final 2 college seasons, he rushed for over 1,200 yards and 16 touchdowns. In his one start last week, I believe he had over, I think it was 56 yards on like 6 carries. The dude is probably like bad passing Taysom Hill, I would imagine, in terms of his just overall athleticism. I mean, he could be in that even like Jalen Hurts level. And what we've seen from him dating back to his college days is that he will, in every game, be looking to run the football. At his price, if you just single stack him with Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp and you play whoever the hell else you want, you can build a great lineup as long as he, say, rushes for a touchdown and throws for one. Because at his price, that's probably all you need from him is 50 yards, rushing touchdown, 1 passing to Cooper Kupp, if that's who you choose to play, or Robert Woods, or a tight end, whatever. So If he plays, I can tell you. I'm not even going to question it. I can tell you if he plays, I'm going to have a decent amount of John Wolford. I like the Cam Akers call. The dude just sees a ton of volume, and they're not massive underdogs. It's what is this, 3.5 points. I think that is still a perfectly fine game script to go back to Cam Akers. Like you said, coming off of, I honestly really didn't think he was going to play last week, given that he missed, I believe, 1 week before that with a high ankle sprain. Like, high ankle sprain sidelined Michael Thomas, I believe, for like 4 or 5 weeks at least. And he comes back after 1 week missed and gets 21 carries. I don't know if he's healthy or they're just pushing him through it, but volume is volume, healthy or not. So I really love the Cam Akers call. On the other side, I think Chris Carson is the one spot of chalk that I really don't understand. Like, they let Rashad Penny get in the mix. Carlos Hyde has typically been in the mix, even when Chris Carson is healthy. I don't get it. Like, why are people playing Chris Carson?
I don't know. I don't get it. I guess if anything, when you're going against the Rams, you got to run against them. But he's sharing carries with, like you mentioned, Penny, Hyde. He's going to get like 10 to 15 touches, but I don't know. I really can't get there. The Seahawks offense has not been looking all that great.
Yeah, Russell Wilson hasn't played well, and then on top of that, they've chosen to run the football. And even if Russell Wilson is not playing well, running the football is almost never the optimal choice when you have competent quarterback play, not good or great quarterback play, just competent. And they've not done that. So when they throw, it doesn't look as good as it did early in the season, and they don't throw as much. And then on top of that, they played some pretty soft opponents in recent weeks. So even their wins have come where they just don't need to do much. Based on the Rams implied team total, it kind of looks that way again. I'd like to find some concentrated volume in one of the receivers, maybe obviously some concentrated volume in their only running back now in Cam Akers, and kind of move away from this game. It's just the total is so low that it really is difficult to get excited about it. Our next game is Washington versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay are 8-point favorites. That's the second highest spread of both slates, actually. A 45-point total that is falling almost split evenly. It's a falling in a point in terms of implied team total for Washington and 0.5 point for Tampa Bay. This game continues to look like another meh game environment, but in the context of 3 slates, like, what do you want me to do? We got 3 games to pick from, and the first game is going to be massive chalk. I actually think at his ownership, I am more likely to go to Tom Brady, who has just been, I don't even want to call it dominant this year, but his stats say otherwise. Like, I've watched him play, and I think, oh man, this guy looks dusted at times. His numbers at the end of the year, he put up 40 touchdowns. He was like one of PFF's 5, I believe, highest graded passers. I'm not the film guy. I can't deny the numbers. He's played well. He's played great. And it shouldn't be a surprise. His receiving core is completely sick. And Mike Evans should be able to play. I believe he technically got logged as a DMP, but he was out there doing some work. So it seems like he should be able to fight through this injury. And despite having a good defense, Washington is just not expected to put up much of a fight here. I love me some Tom Brady stacks. I even think Ronald Jones in like a Tampa Bay onslaught that really is hard leverage off of Josh Allen stacks. I just think a lot of the Tampa Bay side makes a ton of sense. It's just, who do you go to? Do you have any lean on who you're looking at? I mean, you have Ronald Jones is not really part of a passing attack, but just as a part of the offense. And then obviously Evans dinged up, but I think we'll end up playing Godwin, Brown, who both of them played well, but Brown saw the targets, exploded with Evans missing basically 3/4. And then Gronk, who's been like the consummate red zone and deep tight end threat, actually, which is kind of a surprising twist for him, is that even despite him early in the season just looking like this blocker, now they actually use him on deep routes. Since Antonio Brown joined the team, he has a 12 ADOT. That's incredibly high for tight ends. Any lean on how do we dissect this receiving room in terms of the receivers plus Gronk?
Not much of a lean, but I do know that I want to attack this game a lot because, like we mentioned earlier, the Bills game is going to have a ton of chalk, obviously going to be the chalkiest game. I actually like this game a lot from a lot of different aspects, and mostly on the Tampa Bay side. I do think that these Tampa Bay wide receivers are going to be lower owned than they should. If I'm doing like 1 to 3 lineups, I probably won't get there because, like you said, who do you choose in this lineup? But if I'm doing 150 lineups, I'm perfectly fine with spreading out my Godwin, my Mike Evans, my Antonio Brown, guys like that, and stacking with Tom Brady. And like you mentioned, Tom Brady's numbers have been there, but we got to mention, like, against Atlanta, 34 DraftKings points, against Detroit, 32, against Atlanta, 26. Very, very bad defenses. Has a tough matchup here, but still, I think these guys on the Tampa Bay offense will go under-owned because of the Bills offense. So I really do want to attack this game from that aspect. On the flip side, running it back, Terry McLaurin, 6,300. So this Tampa Bay passing defense earlier in the year looked really, really good. As of late, they haven't looked all that great, so I'm not all that scared of it. And good run back options with McLaurin. I think Logan Thomas at 4,900 is a really good run back option. I think he's going to be very popular, but still like him there. And then Cam Sims at 3,900 has been playing a lot as of late, getting a lot of targets as well, just like a really, really cheap option there. So mostly Tom Brady stacks for me, spreading my ownership around with like a Godwin and an Evans or like a Godwin and a Brown, maybe adding a Gronk in there, and then running it back with guys like McLaurin and Thomas. So yeah, I actually really like this game a lot. I really want to attack it because I do think it'll go lower owned than it really should.
Yeah, so I think for me, the last time we saw them on, or the most recent time we saw them on the short slate was that Detroit game. And my only problem, and I played a decent amount of Brady actually, but my biggest problem with them was that you had to play a lot of Tom Brady just to cover all of your Tom Brady bases, and he was still going to be popular. So even the lineups which in actually that game was literally all of the receivers. It wasn't just which combination of them. The combination was all of them. But even in the lineups where, let's say two of the receivers go off, and it turned out to be Chris Godwin and Gronk. It took me in my ballpark 100 lineups across playing most of the low dollar 20 max stuff. It took me 40 or 50 lineups to get there, hypothetically, to get there or whatever. So I had a lot of him. I had to play a lot of him to get there. I was still competing with a ton of people. The Josh Allen ownership on this slate means that I'm not competing with a ton of people. My lineups where I find the right tumblers in picking the lock that is Tom Brady, not a lot of people are actually going to be competing with me in those lineups because Josh Allen, is soaking up, I think, a lot of the quarterback ownership. I think Tom Brady's going to come in second highest owned. It will be a distant second. So I don't need a ton of lineups that have the right combination to have a ton of leverage over the Josh Allen lineups if Tom Brady ends up hitting. Obviously, if it doesn't hit, it won't end up mattering. But I do think just that we're going to get, in terms of the context of a 3-game slate, modest to low owned Tom Brady relative to Josh Allen. I'm much more okay sinking a lot of my lineups in to find the right combination. On the last Tom Brady 3-game slate was 2 Saturdays ago. I was actually playing a lot of Stafford and just running it back with one of the options. That might have not worked out so well. It wasn't the best, honestly, for my bankroll. But I do believe this slate that rolling with it's because Tom Brady was like the most owned quarterback on that slate, I think. So this slate where he's not, I'm fine sinking some lineups to find the right combination. Because if he outscores Josh Allen, that will be the winning lineup, and I want to be on that train. So we move into the Sunday slate. First game is going to be probably not only the chalkiest of Sunday, but on the smaller Saturday, Sunday slates, I would imagine also the most popular there. Maybe it will be the Tennessee Titans versus Baltimore. Baltimore 3.5 or 3 point. I think I've seen this line get down to 3. 3-point favorites, Baltimore, a 54.5 point total. I mean, 29 implied team total, this is the, depending on which book you find, is going to be the highest of both slates. And as an underdog, 25.5 for Tennessee is higher than at least one favorite. It's up there with Tampa Bay as another favorite as well. So, I mean, it's up there with Pittsburgh too. As an underdog, they're one of the better scoring teams of the slate. This looks like the game of all games. Honestly, my only take, it's sort of like what I talked about with Josh Allen. It's not that I think Lamar Jackson is a bad play. And actually, I think Lamar Jackson, relative to the alternatives, is a lesser play than Josh Allen is. But it's that, how many lineups do I need to run through if I'm playing the Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson lineups to find the optimal combination? Because there is just so much that I need to get right if I'm playing all the chalk. I basically need to build the perfect lineup. If Josh Allen hits, I still need to get everything else there. And this goes for Lamar Jackson as well, which is why I bring it up. If Lamar Jackson busts, whatever my Ben Roethlisberger lineups, they don't need to be perfect because I've already saved a ton of salary and probably outscored a quarterback with my Ben Roethlisberger. So it's not that I'm thinking Lamar Jackson is a bad play. So many people are going to be playing him that I'm competing with a third of the field, even if I get that right. So I haven't gained a ton of edge if I get that question right, if Lamar Jackson is or is not in the optimal lineup. So for me, it's sort of like the last high total game we talked about. I'm moving to the other side, and I'm going to be playing a lot of Ryan Tannehill. And honestly, I'm also going to be playing a lot of Derrick Henry because the ownership I've looked at doesn't have Derrick Henry as super popular. And I think that's probably correct. I'm a little leery of saying people won't go back to Derrick Henry after he went for 2,000 yards over the course of 16 games. but we do have Alvin Kamara slightly less expensive and in a better spot for a running back with a higher implied team total as favorites. And then we have Lamar Jackson as also a favorite with the highest implied team total. You just can't play a lot of the combinations of expensive guys. So I think that Derrick Henry ownership is in the ballpark of accurate, but in the ballpark of accurate as in my projection is close to what will actually happen. I don't think that is correct in terms of, does Derrick Henry have like a way lower odds, half the odds of leading the slate in scoring compared to Alvin Kamara? No, I don't think so. I think we're going to see, if the ownership is even close to accurate that I've looked at, I think we're going to see Derrick Henry come in well under his ceiling probability. So I'm going to go back to the big dog, and that's something I hardly ever do.
I like it. I mean, yeah, there's so many different ways to attack this game. It's really hard to ignore how good of a matchup Lamar Jackson has and some of his options there. Brown's been playing really well at 5,400, and how cheap his options are. Mark Andrews, 5,200. So I personally will have a lot of the Ravens offense and Lamar Jackson, Brown, and Andrews there. But on the flip side, like you mentioned, I think a good way to get different is going with Tannehill, Corey Davis, Tannehill, A.J. Brown, stuff like that. And Derrick Henry is a really interesting play here. So I want to play Derrick Henry when the Titans are going to be the favorites. They're going to be like 3-point underdogs, like you said. So if the Titans do get up ahead and start running the ball, that makes it ideal to be playing Henry. But if you think they're going to be coming from behind, I don't know. It's tough because you really don't know what's going to happen. But I will have some Henry for sure. But I would like the Titans to be up, and I'd like them to be running the ball a ton rather than then coming from behind. At that point, you do want to have some Tannehill, some Brown, some Davis. So, yeah, it's so hard to get away from that Jackson chalk because I personally only like 3 quarterbacks on this slate that I'm even considering playing, and it's going to be Lamar Jackson, Tannehill, and Big Ben, somebody we'll talk about. So I will have a decent amount of Jackson, but I'll have a decent amount of the other guys as well. But yeah, definitely a game we want to target here.
Yeah, on the other side, I don't think it needs to get too in-depth. Lamar Jackson is really good. If you are, let's say you have run a Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt lineup. No one is playing Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt as double running backs on an underdog team of 6 points. I'm not saying I'm doing it, but if you have built in that kind of absurd levels of leverage, play chalk everywhere. Like, go for it. Go play if you can afford it. Play your Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and Alvin Kamara lineups. You have built such a unique high leverage against the favored Pittsburgh teams, although I'm not sure they're going to be very popular, but you've built such a unique lineup. Yeah, go for it. Go ahead and play it. But for me, because I'm not going there, my leverage is off Lamar Jackson. I think the only other leverage I have in this game, well, one, I think J.K. Dobbins, if he just scores 2 times on the ground, what you need 5 total touchdowns from the Ravens offense to get there, for Lamar Jackson to get there, I guess, specifically, because at his price and relative to potentially a Ryan Tannehill, a Drew Brees, a Ben Roethlisberger, you probably need 3 scores from him, 2 through the air, 1 through the ground, or vice versa. 5 scores, even at their Vegas total of 29 points, would be well above expectation. If J.K. Dobbins can steal 2 from Lamar Jackson, yeah, I'm playing a decent amount of Dobbins. So I like Dobbins. I don't love Marquise Brown the way he's played this year, but if Mark Andrews is going to be extremely popular, which I do think, given the state of tight end on this slate, is awful, I think he's going to be very popular. Anytime, both with Dobbins and with Marquise Brown, that I can potentially leverage that, I'm going to. I think the Ravens side is kind of obvious, though. If you play Lamar Jackson, you have essentially 2 stacking options in Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews, and you've got to get different elsewhere. I will ask you, do you think there is a place to get different in New Orleans versus Chicago? New Orleans being 10-point favorites, a 47-point total. 47 is middling at 7.5 below the Tennessee game, but you do have a lot of it concentrated on the New Orleans side. So is there a reason to move, not maybe your entire lineup, but, move some pieces to a New Orleans, I don't want to say a team stack, but maybe you could play, a mini game stack, a Darnell Mooney, a Michael Thomas. Do you think that's a way that you can build a different lineup?
Yeah, I don't mind that whatsoever. And Alvin Kamara is on the COVID-19 list. I think they're going to take him off. I think he's going to play, right?
So Sean Payton said, and I'll try and get the quote correct. Someone asked him if he would play, and he said, there's never any guarantees. It's a situational basis on a player playing on no practice, because he will be eligible to be taken off, I believe, on Saturday, essentially. So he won't have practiced. And Sean Payton said, well, every player is a different situation. Alvin Kamara in the playoffs is the situation. There is no situation that you would play a player without getting practice if it's not this one. So I mean, Sean Payton, I think, is just trying to play coy. He also said, I think they don't know the status on Michael Thomas. I would bet anything in a literal must-win game. Win in advance, lose and go home. Alvin Kamara could show up after not having been with the team for a decade, and they would play him.
Exactly. Yeah. So I really like Alvin Kamara, as will a lot of people. Probably the highest owned running back on the slate, more than likely there. Michael Thomas, if he plays, he's way too cheap, 6,300. Not the best matchup, but still like way too cheap for Michael Thomas. I remember earlier in the year he started out his price tag at like 9,000. So seeing him at this price is kind of interesting there. On the Bears side, I think going to David Montgomery actually is pretty interesting there. I know it's David Montgomery. I know it's the Bears. I know it's a really bad matchup, but he's going to be so low owned because of all the Derrick Henry chalk, of all the Alvin Kamara chalk. And listen what Montgomery's been doing the past couple weeks. 28 points versus Green Bay, 20 versus Jacksonville, 32, 27, 27, 28. So like a 6 weeks in a row where he's just been absolutely going off. They're using him in the passing game. So I think going Montgomery gets you a little bit different off of some of that Kamara chalk, off of some of that Henry chalk, and I think he has some decent upside as well. So, yeah, definitely on Kamara, definitely on Thomas. Other than that, not really in love with this game as a whole. Don't really like the Bears side all that much outside of Montgomery. Maybe some Robinson, but really looking at Kamara and Thomas there.
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. Alvin Kamara will probably be the highest owned player on this slate at any position. I'm going to be playing a very sick amount of slant boy Michael Thomas. Like, I mean, you said it. We were talking about at the beginning of the season, week 1, 9K. Oh, well, man, he's probably one of the best in terms of fantasy, especially on a full PPR and 100-yard bonus site. He's one of the best players in the past decade or whatever. 9K seems reasonable. Should we go 9.4, 9.5? Where's the breaking point? 6'3", I think he's 6'4", actually, is a joke. If you told me if I had time traveled from the end of last season to this season, I'd be taking out loans to play Michael Thomas at this. And I think because we're not going to technically know his status probably until late in the week, people building lineups up until Friday are not going to be playing Michael Thomas. So I think I already have an edge in terms of his ownership and then his price and then his leverage off of Alvin Kamara. If Alvin Kamara just goes out and scores 90 yards and a touchdown and adds another 3 for 40 in the rushing game, if Derrick Henry outscores him, Alvin Kamara will not make the optimal lineup. And that type of line from Alvin Kamara becomes much more viable if I told you that, say, Michael Thomas went out and went 12 for 140 and a touchdown. He basically controlled 2 to 3 drives on his own, and the game just kind of petered out after that. They won pretty cleanly. So I think there's a very much tangible possibility that Michael Thomas just does the thing where he controls an entire game, sort of the way that running backs do, where he just sees 14 or 15 targets, because we saw that so many times last season. I think he has the potential. He probably has actually a modest amount of positive correlation with someone like Alvin Kamara, but at his ceiling outcome, if that eats into Alvin Kamara's role, that's all. Like, I was already playing him at 6,400 anyways, but to know now that he could be potential leverage off of Kamara, I'm playing so much Michael Thomas. And it's not that I'm not playing Kamara either, because I've kind of already, at least right now, I don't think I'm playing much Jackson, so I'm free to play Kamara, Henry, Michael Thomas. I'll probably have some Michael Thomas, Kamara, like mini stacks where the Saints offense in this scenario just explodes. But there will also be a lot of my lineups that are dedicated to going Michael Thomas, even Drew Brees. I actually think Drew Brees, because of his team total, is a little interesting, but just a lot of Michael Thomas, because at his price, that's a horrible price if he comes back and is even 80% of what we know as Michael Thomas. On the other side, it's fine. Like you said, like David Montgomery and Allen Robinson, they have incredible roles. The only thing I would add is that Darnell Mooney, I believe, saw 13 or 14 targets last week, and he's generally a downfield target guy. So you're drawing up a lot of air yards in a game where they're going to be throwing. I mean, arguably, this team could lead the slate, not only the slate, both slates, in pass attempts, because they pass at the number 6 rate in the league, and they're a winning team. They're supposed to get crushed in this game. So kind of like some of the ancillary pieces, but nothing too intriguing. Final game of both slates is the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Browns. The Browns are dealing with a community spread, not an outbreak, to be clear. Just a bunch of players randomly got it all at the same time or whatever. They'll be without a bunch of their coaches, Joel Bitonio, I think some defensive players, Daryl Hodge. I'm not sure if Harrison Bryant is eligible to come back or not. I'm not sure, but he's also the third tight end or whatever, so who cares? Vegas does not like them. Vegas says this team is going to go out and probably get stomped by Pittsburgh, who they barely beat with Mason Rudolph. It's a 6-point spread, a 47-point total. I think the Pittsburgh side is really interesting because even when they win, they are one of the pass heaviest teams in the league. I think you can rack up a lot of points with a Deontay Johnson, with a Chase Claypool, even Eric Ebron at tight end. I think is going to be really good leverage because he has like multiple double-digit target games under his belt. I'm not sure if I'm rolling with a Ben Roethlisberger stack though. You sounded like you were interested in that. Sell me on the Ben Roethlisberger stack.
Yeah, I mean, as a Browns fan, it's hard to say that I think that the Steelers are just going to roll here. And you mentioned even when they're winning, the Steelers throw the ball a ton. Even if they're up like 20, 25, they're still going to pass the ball. That's just what they do. So, yeah, I don't mind a Ben Roethlisberger stack against a Cleveland defense that is very, very bad, especially their passing defense in general. So, yeah, I don't mind a Roethlisberger stack at 6,100. He's going to be really, really low owned, more than likely, with the Tannehill ownership, with the Lamar Jackson ownership, and then great stacking options. Deontay Johnson, 6,200, way too cheap. Juju Smith-Schuster, 5,500, way too cheap. Claypool, 5,200, way too cheap. I like all three of them, and you mentioned him, Eric Ebron, at 3,700. So I like these stacking options. Don't know if I'll get to James Conner. I kind of like the game script for him, but they just don't use him as much as I'd like. They pass the ball way too much. So if anything, it's going to be on the Pittsburgh side for me. Really hard to get to like a Chubb or a Hunt. I think Hunt's okay in a game that they should be trailing. And he's way too cheap, 4,000. That's a pretty good price for Hunt there. So Hunt, if anything, running it back with maybe a Hunt or a Landry at 5,800, but it's really hard to see Cleveland having much success, if any, in this game. And like you mentioned last week, they barely beat a Mason Rudolph. So, yeah, I'm liking that Pittsburgh stack, really.
Yeah, I think maybe the most interesting thing about the Cleveland running backs is, like you said, their prices. I mean, Hunt is so low priced. And on top of that, Chubb being, when he's healthy, I mean, one of the best this season, is counting stats won't show it, but like I said, when he's healthy, one of the best pure running backs, like, maybe not quite Derrick Henry levels given what we've seen from him, but a second tier, closest thing we have to Derrick Henry typically. And what is, I believe, 6,700. I don't have it pulled up because I like looking at your beautiful face when we talk. I feel like it makes it more personal. But I believe he's 6,700.
Yeah.
A little interesting because you're getting so much volume, an incredible amount of efficiency. But Vegas kind of tells us that this is maybe not the spot to target the Browns. Last player I have is Rashard Higgins. Rashard Higgins is playing maybe a lower target version, but still a high ADOT and overall great air yards version of this Odell Beckham role. Like, I believe since Odell Beckham went down, he leads the team in air yards. And if not, he's quite up there with Jarvis Landry, who gets there through the brute force of low ADOT targets. He needs a handful of plays to really make this a big game. And we saw, I believe it was versus the Jets, like Baker Mayfield threw like 50 or something times. It was absurd just because they were losing. And even though they didn't have any receivers in that game. So I think this is a team that is at least sharp enough to know that when you're losing, you have to pass the football. Whereas, like, we did not see that with the Titans versus Green Bay when they were losing. So I think this is a team that knows that you pass aggressively and often when you're an underdog, and they are an underdog here. Rashard Higgins isn't crazy expensive, and he needs like 2 plays to break off like a big reception for a touchdown. So I like him as one of my favorite sneaky run backs to either a single Pittsburgh receiver or even a Ben Roethlisberger stack.
Yeah, I definitely like that. Higgins is 4,100. That's crazy. In a game they're going to be trailing, you assume they're going to pass the ball a lot, maybe some garbage time upside as well. Yeah, so yeah, don't mind that at all.
All right, that's the main slate. So we will be back, I think, throughout the playoffs. We've got next divisional round, then championships, then a break, then the Super Bowl. So we've still got a handful of DFS slates before the actual entirety of the NFL season comes to a close. So for myself on Twitter at Kyle Tweets here, for Brady at DFS_numbers, everyone, thanks for watching. And of course, come back and check us out again next week, same time.